Hello, in just a moment, the press preview as we take a look at the morning newspapers. First, though, our top stories. Families of the 30 Britons who died in the Tunisia terror attack plan to sue tour operator TUI after a coroner ruled they were killed unlawfully. Sir Philip Green has agreed a £363 million cash settlement with the pensions regulator to plug the gap in the BHS pensions scheme. And immigration is expected to feature in President Trump's speech when he addresses a joint session of Congress for the first time in just a few hours' time. Well, hello there, you're watching Sky News and the press preview. In the next half hour, we'll see what's making the headlines with the editor of the Times Literary Supplements, Dick Averill, and Carol Malone, columnist and broadcaster. She's laughing again as soon as I say.
Do you know why? Because
she does it every time.
When I edited the Times, look what he's got on. He's got an old woolly jacket on.
It's the creative industries, isn't it?
What shoes have you got on tonight?
Shoes are quite nice. Actually.
Are they quite good?
You can't see them in this new.
They're very
set.
nice. Yeah, they're a present for your wife.
We'll pick them out later. Thanks for that.
Let's keep the eyes on the ball here. Let's focus.
Keep it newsy.
Yeah, focus.
Yes.
Front pages, indeed. The Financial Times leads with Sir Philip Green's BHS pensions payout. He has injected £363 million into the insolvent pension fund of the collapsed retail chain. Better late than never, Sir Philip's payout also features on the front of the Eye. It reports the move has largely been welcomed by the regulator and by MPs. Well, the Times reports the deal will ensure that 19,000 BHS pension holders get better payouts than under the government scheme for failed companies. Pardoned and well done, Mr. Phil, is the Mail's headline on that story. Sir Philip will retain his knighthood, to the dismay of one of the MPs who's quoted as saying it's like rewarding an arsonist who's put out his own fire. In other news, the Metro has a story about a cancer surgeon who is accused of needlessly removing women's breasts to boost his earnings. That court case also featuring in The Sun, it reports women's lives were put at risk. The Telegraph leads with the planned changes to sex education in schools. In the biggest shake-up in nearly 2 decades, children as young as 4 will be given sex and relationship education. Millions of overweight Britons are at risk of developing 11 different types of cancer, according to The Express. The Guardian features a very striking image of the 30 Britons who were killed in 2015's attack on a beach resort in Tunisia. Their families have vowed to sue the tour operator. At least my daughter was never left alone. A woman who faked the abduction of her daughter hits out at the mum of Madeleine McCann in The Star. So Stig and Carol are here, and starting with the picture story of the day. Of many a day, no doubt. It is the Mail.
You called him Mr.
I'll get it eventually.
You called him Mr. Phil.
You did.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Sorry, it's Sir Phil.
But you're quite right.
That's because you know he's watching as well, and you're trying to be respectful. She's being respectful.
It's disrespectful because you basically quite rightly removed his title from him.
No, that says well done, Sir Phil.
Maybe
I apologise for my error.
Maybe she knows something we don't.
You'd be right. This is the least heroic story. I find this extraordinary that the Mail, which campaigned very vigorously against Philip Green, and what he has done is very belatedly, very begrudgingly, and under the force of select committees, the media and public opinion, offered to help the 19,000 pensioners he should have been helping anyway. And so it's nice that he's done that. It's right that he's done it. The question of whether all is forgiven, whether this is a great moment of altruism, or a man finally being partially held to account for ruining a business and placing people's livelihoods at risk while he enjoyed the very, very, very opulent fruits
I
of the
think
company.
if one look at social media will tell you that he has not been forgiven, not by a long stretch.
But he has by the Mail.
People are saying, OK, you've got the money now give us the knighthood. And I think part of the problem for this, all summer long, all of last summer, we saw him on his yacht, on one of his 3 yachts, in the Mediterranean, sunning himself. And every time he was approached by a reporter, he got very angry and a bit aggressive. And I think it was almost like he was flashing this opulent lifestyle in the faces of these 19,000 BHS workers who had a pension black hole and who didn't know whether they're going to be able to manage in their old age. And I don't think he will ever be forgiven this, because the bottom line is he's had 400 million quid dividends out of this company. He's still 37 million up up on the deal, even paying this money. But it also says, the story is very carefully put, it says he has agreed to pay up to £363 million. Now, I don't quite know what does up to mean? I mean, I know some papers are doing that, but if you read the story more carefully, it says up to. And Frank Field, the MP who campaigned to get him to pay, he's saying this is not over. Everyone is saying, well, this is finished now, he's done it, he's done the decent thing. But Frank Field is saying it's not over. He says I think there are a lot of other issues which are not solved by this, which we will obviously be looking at, and the courts and everybody else will be. So,
yeah, I don't know what the pension liability is now. Certainly the stock market's been doing well, which normally means that the pension pots grow.
Yeah.
So perhaps the pension pot that was, estimated at 600 odd million has come down in itself. But, you're a retailer to make money.
Yes.
Why are we so cross that he's made so much?
Because the way
he sold the company.
Yeah, he sold the company
for
a pound to someone with no retail experience,
yes,
having taken lots of... Now, he would say he put money into it, and he's entitled to make money out of it. But what you're probably not entitled to do is when you are gaining something like BHS, which has its place on the high street, has a place within British retail culture, is to take 400 million quid in dividends and then sell it for a pound to someone palpably, manifestly unqualified, and then the due process around it, the due process around how the pension fund was being managed, was not conducted with the greatest deal of rigour. I mean, he's done this because he is terrified. I mean, ironically enough in all of this, he really does care about public opinion. He does care about newspaper front pages and boisterous Sky reporters asking him questions. He's very, very thin-skinned, so he does want to keep his right.
But the problem is he didn't care very much about the workers, and I think that's the problem. Yes, he is a businessman and he is in it to make money, but it became very clear he didn't give a stuff about the people who worked for the company that he had bought. And I think that's why he will never regain his reputation after this. People have seen him, and it doesn't matter how much money he pays back now. I think his reputation will never recover from this.
Yeah, the Financial Times leading on this as well. Probably enough to retain his knighthood. I mean, that's a sort of a separate issue in some respects.
But it shouldn't be.
Well, I think it
shouldn't. He shouldn't retain his
knighthood. Is it as important as 19,000 people getting the pension?
I think the two are inexorably connected.
Yes, I think
the only reason he's done this is
to keep his knighthood.
Yeah. Not the only reason. The main reason, or one might infer, the main reason is he wants to keep his knighthood. The pressure that was put upon him were by newspapers, broadcasters and select committees saying, come on, let's have a go, let's see if we can get him to do this, to stick up for the 19,000.
If he cared about those people, he'd have done this a long time ago. And there was somebody asked the question today, why is he off?
What negotiations? He always said he would sort it.
Well, he always said he did,
but maybe things need to be put in place.
And he's given more than they would have got if the pension regulator had got it. So look, if you wanted to look at in incredibly generous terms to him, he's given more than he would have had to probably had his hand.
But we don't know if there's a deal. We don't know what's gone on behind the scenes, as Anna's just said. There could be something like that. There was also talk, wasn't there, at the beginning of all this, that the government would be looking into his companies. Maybe that's the deal now. No one looks into his companies, he just carries on.
I'm fascinated by the fact that the Daily Mail has learnt the power of forgiveness.
I think
it doesn't forgive many people many things ever, and yet it's forgiven. Well done.
He has. It's just saying pardon. It doesn't say they've pardoned.
It says the Mail hereby revokes the title Sir Shifty.
Well done, Sir Phil. That's by Daily Mail.
Oh, let's just wait.
That's a warm.
Give it a week. Give it a week.
Yeah,
have I got page 4? Not yet. Okay.
Nice fiddle.
Yeah. Let's move on, shall we, to the Daily Star.
This story's been knocking around a little bit because if you remember, this is to do with Karen Matthews, who pretended she had lost her daughter and meanwhile was always involved in concealing her. And there was recently a BBC drama about it, which kind of brought it back into the public attention again. And she said, well, look at the McCann family, what a terrible parents they were for neglecting their child and leaving her alone. And the contrast between the two cases was always very much what happens when a middle-class family has a tragedy involving their daughter, when a very, very poor person from a very poor estate up north has a seemingly similar tragedy, people react in a different way. I mean, of course, Karen
it wasn't a similar tragedy at all.
In the end, it wasn't.
But you're saying that while she was missing, and we didn't know that Karen Matthews was implicated.
Exactly.
It seemed the same.
But I think a lot of people will think she has a point, because I think a lot of people would look at McCann's, and everyone knows the story of what happened. A lot of people will say, yes, they left their 3 children, alone in an unlocked room for many nights in a row. Yes, they were checking on them every 2 hours, but I used to write, when I was doing my column, I used to write about this and say, you leave 2 young babies in a bed on their own. Never mind about kidnappers. They could fall out of the bed. They could do anything could happen to them. This Madeline could have got out of bed and tried to put a kettle on or lit a match. Anything could have happened to them. And I think a lot of people are angry with the McCanns for leaving their kids for as long as they did.
Have they not been punished enough? What I find about this is that I understand that argument, but in the end,
they have been punished enough.
Well, they have, haven't
She's
they? Because
making a point.
But they've had the worst thing that could ever happen to a family happen to them. And yet it's easy now for people to sort of pile in and say, oh, they're terrible parents.
People have always piled in
and unfairly, in my view, because whatever...
Really?
Well, in the end...
Let me ask you a question. How many times have you left your kids?
Well, I haven't done that, but have I ever acted... Is everyone
No,
always
have you ever left your kids in a room, alone, unattended for hours at a time?
Just because I've never done that doesn't mean I want to have don't want to have empathy with a family who've absolutely lost everything as a result.
We're not saying that no one's got empathy because they've lost their children.
I would say that indicates a complete lack of empathy, and I think when people pile in against the McCanns, what it demonstrates, and I realise that people will say, people have a lot of vitriolic feelings about this, but
they do.
I think if you lose empathy for a family that have lost their child, you've really lost...
We're not losing empathy, and what I'm saying is she has a point. She is saying she never left her kids alone. That's the point I mean, and I think a lot of people...
And there is context here.
She did leave her kids alone. She left her kid under a bed with an uncle while she pretended to have had a missing... To take any form of moral or otherwise lectures from Karen Matthews.
See the point she's making.
I think she's disqualified from talking about parenting at the very, very least.
Oh, please, and yeah, OK. Well, the same argument could be said.
Well, I think Karen Matthews is absolutely disqualified forever for criticising any parents ever.
You can think that, but she has an opinion and she's given it.
Daily Express, talking about a study in the British Medical Journal, found that being obese increases the risk of cancer of the esophagus, multiple myeloma, which I think is bone marrow, stomach, bowel, rectum, biliary tract system, which is liver, gallbladder and bile duct, pancreas, postmenopausal breast, womb, ovary and kidney. This is cheering us up on a Tuesday night. This is a big and important study.
This is big.
We're killing ourselves by being fat.
I think there'd already been stories about how there were obesity caused 3 or 4 cancers. I don't think it's ever been put down at this many. But I suppose what upsets me about this, that, we have been talking about obesity now as the scourge of the biggest thing that the NHS pays for. It costs £16 billion a year. It costs the country as a whole £47 billion a year. But it's not getting any better. Whatever we do, whatever measures we put in place, people are still overeating. And I'm not entirely sure that having people reading about all this is going to make any difference.
Food tastes great.
Yes, and that is the problem.
And it's getting, as you say, it's getting worse. And the problem we're going to have is, and it is absolutely connected to the ongoing debate we have about the NHS and its ability to look after us.
So what is the proportion of the budget, then, of the NHS that we could prevent if we looked after ourselves? 16 billion against the budget of 120 billion. But if you look at the NHS generally, 40% of the NHS is taken up in treating stuff that we could not have caused by changing our lifestyle. So nearly half of every pressure on the NHS, every time you go into a ward, an A&E, anywhere, and you see the pressure on it, nearly 40% of that is in our hands, the hands of people in this country.
Why is that message not getting through?
To not drink, to not smoke, to not get too fat, to exercise a bit.
Why are we as a nation not taking any notice of that?
I think what it is because it's too easy to get fat now. I think we burn 800 calories less a day than we did 30 years ago. You talk about sort of easy calorific meals.
But no one is...
Everything is piling up together.
But we all know all of this. We know we eat too many calories. We know we're not doing enough exercise, and still we don't do anything about it.
I think because of the NHS is free.
And I'm sitting here as someone who does nothing about it.
And that's the thing. And the thing about the NHS is, ironically, unlike any other health system in the world, you never really feel that your money is being spent on it. So you never really... I think in a weird way, we take our health for granted in this country because we've got an NHS that cleans up after us for free all the time.
I mean, this is... Less than half the population realise that being obese increases the risk of cancer.
Okay.
We should know that.
Well, this is a study funded by the World Cancer Research Fund and carried out by Imperial College London, so I think perhaps we take heed, don't we? Plenty more still to come, including... what it says on there.
Say it,
Helen.
Shall I say it? How having sex can help you develop new muscle strength.
So
that. OK, back in a moment. Well, welcome back to the press preview, taking a look through the newspapers during this evening by Nick Abel and Carol Malone. Here's the story in The Sun. Call my bluff, kind of.
Yes,
that's
an original headline.
Yes, exactly. So the Prime Minister is telling her cabinet to draw up laws for a hard Brexit. Tell us more.
Yeah, this is in a bid to call the EU's bluff, and she's saying that she believes that we're only going to get a good deal if the EU completely understands that we're prepared to go it alone if they start messing us about. And I think she's right, and that's why I get cross with people trying to derail Brexit and demanding that she tells them what she's going to do. If you go into negotiations, you don't tell people what you're going to do 6 months beforehand because you're weakening your hand. And
What about John Major's calls yesterday, Sir John?
Yes.
For a little bit more charm, a little bit less cheek rhetoric. Are we back to the world of cheek rhetoric?
I think the grey man has got a cheek, hasn't he? Where was his charm when he was in office? He didn't have any. And anyway, what does he matter in the scheme of things? He's an old, irrelevant man.
Well, I just think the point he was making, I mean, whether he needs to make it and the fact that he and Blair make it kind of shows how difficult this world we're now living in politically for people who don't believe in Brexit. It seems to be at least, if both sides have to recognise there is a large chunk of people in the country, almost about half, who don't agree with it.
Why do people keep saying that? Of course everyone realises that.
So when you see phrases like the will of the people to talk about Brexit, that's probably
Well, you've brought it up.
I mean, but you see it everywhere.
It was a majority of the people that voted for Brexit. You can't get away from that. Right. But the bottom line is, he always used to complain, Major, that Maggie Thatcher was always interfering in his government. What is he doing to Theresa May? Every time, he's done it in November, he did it now, Blair did it last week. They're undermining everything she's trying to do. And you know what? They'll blame her if she doesn't get a good deal, but they're making a good deal very hard to get.
What she's going to do is, every time there is a problem, she's going to, under the counter, buy off a certain industry. You've seen it with Nissan. Nissan have come out today and said, we're going to make sure we're going to review our situation once we see what the government's going to give us. Her job is to try and keep all the lights on, and if she doesn't get the right deal out of the EU, there'll be a massive welfare state for individual industries.
So if that's blue on blue, what is this one?
Well, this is unbelievably a political organisation with only one MP having a backbench revolt. And if you had to try and epitomise UKIP, that's what you would have to epitomise it as. So there's been some email leaking that Douglas Carswell, the once Tory, now UKIP, may well be Tory again, has blocked Nigel Farage. Now, Nigel Farage hates the establishment. He hates it. He's an anti-establishment person who's desperate to get into the House of Lords. He's someone who hates posh boys, but he went to a public school and then worked in the city.
Hang on. Do you really think he shouldn't be in the House?
Of course he shouldn't be in the House of Lords. Ask Carol about sex.
Yes.
Oh, it's all right.
This is fantastic.
Do I have to?
Yes.
This is in the Sun. It says,
I'm going to very slowly find this. Hold on.
Having sex can exercise all 657 muscles in the body, a new study says. Well, not the way I do it, it doesn't. Maybe the way you do it or she does it. But I didn't know I had 657 muscles in my body.
Can I go now?
I'd like people to start. I'd like people to start limbering up. It's midnight. People are watching the press. 657 muscles.
Here's another thing he says. Ideally, sex should last for 45 minutes.
Oh,
yeah. There's another.
It's only midnight. The night's young.
Dear.
Loosen up,
I can't believe she's so weird about it.
Got to get to the weather. Yeah. Got to get to the weather.
Bye then.
Bye. 45 minutes.